Let this sink in. On average, women will participate in about 7 years more unpaid work than men over the course of their lifetimes. That time, long enough to complete an undergraduate and a postgraduate degree, is lost to unpaid and unrecognized labor. So next up on our program is a timely conversation about the care economy, and we're so lucky to witness it. Please welcome the head of the International Domestic Workers Federation, who represents over 600,000 household workers globally, and the UN Women Representative in Mexico, who's been advocating for redistribution of care work through the new Global Alliance for Care. Here are Elizabeth Tang and Belen Sanz.
So hi, Elizabeth, and it's so wonderful to see you after the many sessions we've had together and have a space to discuss about the care economy in this very lively space. So it's really lovely to see you. I admire a lot your work.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see you again. Today we have a big topic to discuss, and I'm very pleased that we are able to talk about the SDGs, because this is our responsibility, government responsibility, employer responsibility, and indeed it's everyone's responsibility. And I believe we as women are more eager to see actions.
Yeah.
No, totally. And I think today it is great that we are together and we can talk about what we think are important to do, and because it is possible to make it happen.
Yeah, no, definitely. And something I was thinking before coming to this space is like, if we all share this common vision of an equal world, an inclusive world, and this vision of the SDGs of no one left behind, what is at stake in terms of excluding half of the humanity, women and girls, from this vision of inclusion, of a just world? And it came to me as we've been discussing in different spaces, and today, that really the care unfair distribution is one of the structural issues that make women and girls be excluded from this inclusive development. No, so I was thinking a lot about how can we share with others why this is so structural, and why this generates a real urgency to act together in terms of transforming the dedication to care, in terms of recognizing care, and in terms of redistributing this task to the whole society. No? So I have some ideas about this, but maybe you want to start kind of moving in your own analysis of this. Why?
Yeah, indeed, it is a very important question. We really need to look at them seriously. For me, the main barrier is recognition. Domestic workers are part of the care workforce. Care work involves many professions. There are nurses, there are social workers, there are home care workers, and also domestic workers. But then in a lot of people's perceptions, domestic workers do what usually women do, for generations. So they are just being taken for granted as natural or as traditional. So they are not considered as skilled work, and so they are of a very low or even no value. So they don't deserve legal protections. Domestic workers have no status, and they are even being excluded in legal rights protections. And these have contributed to the poverties and a lot of vulnerability of domestic workers, even though they are such an important pillar in the care economy.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that you tackled on something that it's so clear in a country like Mexico, where I work in UN Women, because, I think informality is one of the main challenges that women face in the labor market. And of course, the domestic workers are facing that discrimination, even in the law in many of our countries. Mexico recently passed a law to reform the labor law and to adopt 189 ILO convention. But it's something also about changing the culture, because something we've discovered throughout the work on care economy, and you said it, is that the lack of recognition is not only an issue of excluding women unfairly, but of considering women of less value in terms of access to the market. And what we've seen in the case of domestic workers here is that it is considered, or it has historically been considered, not a real job, something that is not so formal, and therefore an exclusion from the economy. So part of the work we're doing is how can we shift that cultural perspective or social discriminatory norm that help us to really understand that the contribution of women to the economy is so huge, and that if 60% of women are out of the formal labor market, they're excluded from social protection, from labor rights, like basic labor rights. And that's why we've been working together with you and others in this Global Alliance for Caring, kind of how can we move to recognition, but also how can we move to redistribution, so that both the paid care workers, such as domestic workers, and unpaid care workers, such as women in millions of homes in Mexico, Latin America, and the world, really get support for redistributing this dedication. No? And I wanted just to share a couple of data that to us is like very important. One is the fact that close to 55% of women in Mexico work outside of the formal sector, but at the same time, women dedicate at least 2.6 more time than men to care work that is unpaid, caring for the children, for the elderly, for the sick, persons who need support. And of course, when we also assess the data on what would be the economic value of these women contributing to the economy in Mexico, and it contributes to close to 28% of the GDP in Mexico. This corresponds to higher than the manufacture sector. So if we value this work, as you say, if we recognize it, we would see that the economic contribution of women to the economy is so huge that we need to really account for it and make a recognition, but then a redistribution of the burden that care can imply in this sense. So,
yeah, Belen, thanks for mentioning the wonderful work that has been done in Mexico. Actually, this is one of my favorite countries when I want to talk about what can be done to protect the rights, to improve the conditions of domestic workers in the country. Because in Mexico, not only that the government has begun to see the value of domestic worker and that their rights, their well-being has to be protected, but also domestic workers have stood up and they have been campaigning very, very hard to create awareness in the communities on their rights, on the need for social protection, but they have also actively to promote the need for social protection, the need for social domestic workers to be enrolled in the social security scheme, and they collaborated with the government, and they have been able to enroll over 20,000 domestic workers in the past 3 years in the social security scheme, and that has really not only enabled these domestic workers to enjoy social protection, but also because of these activities, they have created a widespread awareness among the employers and also people in the community. And that is how people begin to change their perceptions of domestic work, of domestic workers, the value of domestic work. And that is absolutely what we need to replicate in other countries, because to change laws, legal protection, to change norms, perceptions. We need everyone to work together, not just the government. Our government is responsible for the legal reform, but then we need everyone in the societies, the workers, the employers, to buy in, to make them real, to implement them. And we have seen this have started to work in Mexico. And similarly, we also see similar examples in other countries, like Argentina. In Argentina, we also have a very active domestic workers union, the UPA. By the way, the domestic workers union in Mexico, which is our affiliate, is called Sinatral. Yes. And so in these two countries, we see how unions, domestic workers, and the governments and the employers work collaboratively to make this change. And similarly, also we see in Italy, in France, in many European countries, domestic workers are already represented by trade unions. And through these unions, they enjoy more rights, better wages through the collective agreement the union signed, that make possible this right. So, yeah. This collaboration is really the key. That is why my organization, the International Domestic Workers Federation, is keen to promote domestic workers to come together, to speak for themselves, and to be part of the decision making to shape better policy and better legislations. And I really want to congratulate you on this.
No, and I think it's great, Elizabeth. I think your organization is an inspiration for many women on the ground to really speak up, and Mexico is an example of that. And I just wanted to briefly touch on the other part of the care sector, which is that unpaid work that women are actually taking the houses. And for us, the SDGs will not be achieved unless we recognize that work, we value it, we redistribute it, and we reduce it for women, so we can free women's time to do whatever women want, to enter into the labor market, to have their rights recognized. And that's why we launched this Global Alliance for Care, of which you're part. We believe that this multi-stakeholder action can help us to develop comprehensive care systems, and the government, the private sector, international organizations can all work on this. So it's critical for us.
Yes, I agree absolutely with you. Let us work together.
So that's great, and we will certainly do that. And anyone who is looking at this, we hope they can follow the work your organization is doing, our organization is doing, and this Global Alliance for Care, which is a good platform for sharing this.
Yes.
What many stakeholders are doing to advance this agenda, no?
Yes.